Hi everyone, welcome back to The Mystic in the Woods. I'm Kate, and today we are going to do the first video in a 3-part series all about deity work. So this is a topic that I get questions about all the time, both in general and as it applies to shadow work and as it applies to tarot. So I've decided to do two things. First is this 3-part video series where we're going to get into kind of the nuts and bolts and stuff of deity work and what it can look like to get you started. I've also decided to run a 3-hour-long masterclass on January 28th, where we're going to do shadow work with deity. So we're going to be very interactive. There's going to be some teaching. I'm going to lead a guided journey so that you can meet the face of deity that's coming forward for you at this time. We're going to do shadow work. We're going to do some tarot and oracle pulls, all that kind of stuff. So all that information is at the link below. In this video, I want to start kind of at the beginning. What is deity work? Why would you want to do it? How to find your deity? Because these are questions that I get a lot. And before we do that, there's a few things that I just want to mention, right? So first of all, this video is my experience, both for myself and working with others. You should take what resonates with you and you should leave what doesn't, okay? I am certainly not the authority on deity work, but this is full of my personal gnosis and my personal experiences. Secondly, you do not have to be at any particular level in your practice in order to do deity work. Every now and then we hear practitioners say, like, you have to be an advanced practitioner or you need to know XYZ in order to do deity work. I don't believe that that's true. And then third, you don't have to do deity work. So if this is not something that you feel pulled towards, you don't need to do it. But on the flip side of that, if you do feel called to work with a deity, then this is for you. And you don't need to wait for somebody's permission, and you don't need to wait for a deity to come busting down the door and be like, hey, I'm here to work with you. So we're going to cover that stuff here in this video. So deity work is very much an umbrella term for working with kind of any being traditionally labeled a god or a goddess, but also I've seen this used for angelic energies, for goetic infernals, for other types of sort of personified beings and guides. So deity work can kind of be an umbrella term that is used a lot in the community. I'm generally referring to beings that have been traditionally called gods or goddesses, but really, like I said, it kind of is that umbrella term. Now, when it comes to deity work, you get to decide whether you see these beings as separate beings sitting outside of you with their very own consciousness, or pieces of your own psyche, archetypal pieces that are already within you. It's completely up to you. I tend to fall a little bit in the middle, right? As within, or as above, so below, as within, so without, right? It's a little bit of both. But you get to decide where you fall on that spectrum. And when you're talking or hearing about deity work, it can really involve a lot of different things as well, and it does look very unique to each person. But when people talk about deity work, they are often talking about working with a deity inside of meditation, communicating with them via divination, devotional practices or acts of service, working with them inside of ritual or ceremony, leaving offerings, building altars, asking for support in any area of life, petitioning them for help, working with them to learn something, to heal something, to grow in some way. So very often there is a sort of mentor-mentee type of a relationship within deity work that leans a little bit more towards a partnership, but very much a mentor-mentee relationship. I want to hit that word relationship. When people use the word deity work, we are generally talking about a two-way relationship where communication and support is flowing in both directions, just like it would be with any person that you're having a relationship with. And just like with any relationship, you get to say yes or no. Are you wanting to work with this deity? Do you want to engage in specific practices? You get to decide that. And on the other side of that, deity can decide whether or not they want to work with you. So it's very much a two-way relationship. Now, why would you want to do deity work, right? So this is another question. So if deity work can involve all of these different practices and it looks different on everybody, then why would we do deity work? Very often, again, this involves working with a deity to learn something, to heal something, to grow in some way. all of these different spirits, deities, you might see my dog walking around. She's black, so she blends in a little. All of these different deities hold within them different archetypal wounds, different archetypal patterns, different archetypes themselves. And when we stand in front of these deities, they can mirror back to us and bring to the surface archetypes, wounds, patterns that are already within us. Help bring them to the surface where we can see them, heal them, integrate them, and embody them. And working with personified deity does that in a very unique way that I've not experienced within any other modality. So let's talk about finding your deity, right? Because very often there's all this pressure that I've noticed in the community that like deity has to really put up a neon sign in order for you to be able to work with them or bust through your door, right? Like we're looking for big, obvious signs that a deity is reaching out to us. And that does sometimes happen. Generally, when people say a deity was reaching out to them, they are talking about signs, symbols, repeating patterns like colors or numbers, these types of things. They also might be seeing the same story pop up or the same name popping up just in their day-to-day life over and over. Now, they also might be talking about feeling or hearing or seeing a deity inside of meditation stepping into their space. And we're going to talk more about that in part 3, is that ability to sort of feel deity or to know that they're present or to receive those messages. We're going to talk more about that in part 3, but I would argue that if you are feeling pulled to deity work, it is very likely that there are signs being presented to you that maybe you aren't noticing. And I'm going to argue that you're not noticing them for one of two main reasons. But this should not be taken as like a written in stone only sort of thing, right? Like this is not a hard and fast rule. But two reasons that I have primarily noticed. First being that we are trying to listen in a way that we cannot hear. So we are determined to see signs out in the environment, but maybe that's not how they're going to come to us. Or maybe we are determined to see things inside of meditation, but seeing things is not the skill that's online for us at this time. You can look at the clairs as sort of a framework for this, right? Like clairvoyance, clairaudience, clairsentience. You can look at that as kind of a framework for this, in that there are numerous ways that we can gather information, and we all have ones that are, we're more inclined to use, that are easier or already more online than others. And then we have other skills that need more time and attention to build to the point where we can use them like effectively and efficiently. So if you're determined to see something, but that's not how you're going to get a sign, then it's going to feel like nothing's coming through. Secondly, is unconscious blocks and things like witch wounds can very much impact your ability to receive signs from deity and guides. Witch wounds we are almost all carrying them in some type of ancestral way, epigenetic way, past life way. This is the wound that tells you it's not safe to be a witch, to be intuitive, to be a healer, to be in your power, to use your voice, to be seen. And a witch wound can very much prevent any one of these sort of clairs, just to keep us within a framework, from coming online. So there are a lot of people, for example, whose clairvoyance is just off because of something like a witch wound. And when we do shadow work to unblock those blocks, to heal that wounding, then those skills start to come online and it becomes a little bit easier. So that's something to keep in mind if you feel like you're not like getting any signs from deity. But we're going to talk about that again more in part 3. Now, let's say, so you aren't seeing signs, you're not noticing signs, you're not feeling signs, but you really want to work with deity. So let's talk about finding your deity in that area. Now, first of all, if you are feeling drawn to deity, and there is a deity you're feeling drawn to, I would say that is a sign. That is them pushing you to reach out. So if you just like love Persephone, you think she's so cool, you love her story, you really want to work with her, but you don't feel like she's reaching out to you, I'd say that's a pretty good sign that she is reaching out to you. Okay. So if there's one that automatically comes to mind that you really like, that you're really interested in, that you really want to work with, I say go with that, okay? And if you do want to join me on the 28th for our masterclass, you can come with a deity in mind if there's a specific one you'd like to connect with. That can be your intention going into our journey, is to connect with that specific face of deity. That's perfect. I'm gonna look at my list here so I don't forget. So we talked about if there's one you're feeling pulled to. Ancestry is another really good direction to go if you feel pulled towards deity work, but you don't know who to connect with. So we all have pre-Christian, I'm going to use Christianity as my example because that's my tradition that I was born into. But I'm sure the same goes for other like newer religions. But we all have pre-Christian traditions, pre-Christian ancestors with their own pre-Christian spiritual practices and deities and spirits and all the things. So your ancestry can be a great way to get started, to say, okay, who were my pre-Christian ancestors? What did their spiritual practices look like? What deities belonged to those groups of people? And that can be a really good direction to go. I will say one thing about that, just as a little warning, is that if you are like me and you have a lot of Germanic and Nordic ancestry, the deities are great, but just use your discernment, because there are certainly groups of people, not all people by any stretch of the imagination, but there are groups of people within those traditions currently that very much lean towards white supremacy, where white supremacy is very much an issue. So just keep that in mind when you're doing your research. So ancestry, that's one way. That can be a great way. Another way to look at what deity might be a good one to connect to is what areas in your life are you looking to heal? Are you looking for support in? Are you looking for help in? Are you looking for boundaries, for learning how to really establish firm boundaries? Are you looking for help stepping into your power or finding your voice? Are you looking to release shame? Are you looking to heal a mother wound or a father wound? This type of, so deity work can really help us with our shadow work, okay? And if we know what area of our life we're really looking for support and help in, that can help us to choose a deity, because they do all kind of have, they all carry different archetypes, right? They all have different myths. And within those myths and stories and archetypes are different types of wounds, are different types of strengths, are different types of skills. And so if there is an area of your life that you're really looking for support in, that can be a way to choose the face of deity you would like to reach out to. Another way, let's see, similar to that, archetypes. So archetypes you're either drawn to or triggered by. So if you are either very drawn to like mother energy, right? Like you really feel like you want that safety and that love and that feeling of support that can come from a mother, or you feel very activated by mother everything, mother archetypes, mother energy, mother in general, that is information that can help you to say, should you be working with a mother goddess? Would that be healing for you at this time? Or should you be working with a male god or something like that? So looking at the archetype that you're either very drawn to or very pushed away from. So the witch archetype, the mother archetype, I'm totally blanking on all there's tons and tons of archetypes, right? But looking at which archetypes you're feeling drawn to or pushed away from can give you a lot of information on which direction to go when you are looking at what deity might be the right one to work with. Let's see. Also on here, I have readers. There are lots of good like tarot readers or other types of like divinatory readers, right? Who can absolutely kind of play matchmaker and help you to connect with the deity that's right for you at this time. You're definitely going to be wanting to find one you trust for that. There, just like with anything, there are amazing readers out there and there are less amazing readers out there, right? And then stories you're drawn to. This is also on my list. So if there is a story that you've always been drawn to or just recently you've been drawn to, that can be a great avenue to explore. So if you are just fascinated by Medusa and her story, that's a great avenue. If you are fascinated by Hades and his story, great. If you are just fascinated by Mary Magdalene's story, okay, that is a good sign that deity is pushing you to connect with them, that you in some way have a connection to that deity in the first place. And then finally, research. So if you are trying to find a deity, research is a great place to start. And once you do choose a deity, it becomes especially important then. You're going to hear me talk about research again in every single one of these upcoming videos because it really is important. So just start researching deities and different spirits, especially if you can find an archetype or something like that. Just start researching them. And it's very likely that one of them you're going to feel some type of pull towards or resonance towards or interest in. And that's going to give you a lot of information as well. So just research. Now, research also leads me to the topic of cultural appropriation and the importance of keeping deities within their cultural context. Now, this is a question I did get specifically. And I want to make very clear that I am not the authority on cultural appropriation, and I reserve the right to change my opinion on this as I grow and evolve. But this is where I'm at right now with cultural appropriation as it relates to deity work, and these are just guidelines. These are things to think about to find where you land on some of these different spectrums, okay? So first of all, research is important here because that's what is going to help you determine how open or closed a specific tradition is, and a specific deity within a specific tradition is. Okay, the research is going to help you with that. And I do think there's something to be said for very closed practices. You're not going to find the information in the first place unless you're a part of that practice. However, even open traditions can be culturally appropriated from, then that's a whole discussion, which we're not going to go too in depth in this video, but research is going to help you. While you're researching, it's really important to do a couple of things here, okay? You want to be finding voices to listen to within the tradition of the deity in question, okay? One of my dogs is now coming out from under the bed. Apparently my dogs are just making all kinds of cameos in these videos today. But the research part, you want to be listening to voices that come from within the tradition. Okay, that's really important. They are the authority on whether something is cultural appropriation or not, and how open and closed their practices are, and they are the authority on how to keep something within its current, especially current day, but really just in general, keeping something within its cultural context. So if the only voices that you're listening to are people who don't belong to those traditions, you're not getting the full picture, okay? So we want to listen to the people within those traditions, and we want to really take in what they're telling us about what is and is not appropriate for us to do. Secondly, with research, scholarly opinions are invaluable, okay, as well. Because, especially when we start to talk about traditions that are no longer living or are no longer living in any way that closely resembles how they used to, right? Because, of course, traditions grow and evolve and change. Some pretty much end. The human history is quite long and involved. But scholarly opinions can help you to understand something's cultural context within its ancient context and what that would mean in current day, how that would transfer over to current day. So let me just give you a quick example from within Christianity, because again, that's the religion I was born into, and if you've been following me for a while, you know that I work in depth within that pantheon, primarily Asherah, Eve, Lucifer, Lilith, these types of beings, Mary Magdalene. If we are trying to determine, for example, what the Bible has to say about same-sex relationships, not only do we need to look at a translation that is nuanced, that is educated, that is accurate, we also need to hear that translation and that opinion from somebody who understands the historical and cultural context within which the scripture was originally written and originally understood. Because culture today looks nothing like culture looked 2,000 years ago or 2,500 years ago when these scriptures were being written. And so if we want to understand what the Bible has to say about same-sex relationships, we can't just take it at face value. We have to understand how that scripture has been translated and retranslated. We need to understand what those words, how those words would most accurately be translated into current day English, and we need to understand the cultural context in which that scripture was written. Otherwise, we cannot know what the Bible has to say about, again, it has to say about same-sex relationships. And I say all this being not a Christian at this point, okay? But I do a lot of study on the Bible. So we have to, if we are looking for historically accurate, and for some of our traditions, there are not historically, like there aren't a lot of historical texts. But if we want to be doing well-rounded research, scholarly perspectives are invaluable as well. So keep that in mind when you're doing research. Now let me just check my list here again. Okay, so research. In the discussion about cultural appropriation and context, I also want to talk about this. And this is something that I've heard said and echoed by numerous people within various traditions. Because I listen to a lot of different voices in a lot of different traditions and in a lot of different areas of the world. And it is this, that spirits are not bound by our human traditions and our human boundaries. They can work with whoever they choose, generally speaking. You, me, us, as humans, are bound by those traditions and those boundaries. And so, just because a deity from a different pantheon comes to you, does not automatically give you the right to that tradition's practices, and especially anything that is deemed closed by them. It does not automatically give you permission to teach on, to speak on, to make money on these things. So this is again where it's important to listen to people within those traditions and within those lineages, okay? So that's something to consider as well. And this is not me making a blanket policy on whether or not anybody should be teaching about Kali or anyone should be teaching about Tara or what. This is absolutely not a blanket statement. These are guidelines that I think we all need to think about, okay? So there's something very different about doing something within your own practice and doing something publicly, especially to make money. These are different scenarios. And the deity in question, the traditions in question, all of this stuff impacts it. This is not a black and white situation. This is very gray. There are some situations that are quite black and white if we're truly listening to the voices of the people within those traditions. Anyway, let me move on to the third thing. The third guideline here. So the first guideline, research. I'm looking at my list. Research. Second guideline, spirits are not bound by human traditions. You are. And third guideline is to keep the deity in their cultural context. And again, this is where research comes in. You need to research history, culture, listen to voices of people, again, within those traditions and lineages, but we don't want to remove them completely from their cultural context, okay? That's where we really start to potentially get into issues with the spirit itself, as well as people, which we don't want to be hurting people. This is where we start to really hit cultural appropriation, stuff like that. So this research, though, is also going to be really, really important as we start to talk about in our next two videos, how to begin setting up altars, creating offerings, how to approach deities, what type of work you might be engaging with them, all of that type of stuff. The research piece is really helpful for that. Having said that, there are plenty of beings where you're not going to find a whole lot. There are a couple of beings that I work with that you can find almost nothing about except for one or two references, and that's going to be about it. But we want to do the research that we can do. So that's it for this video because it's already getting quite long, okay? In part 2, we're going to be talking about the nuts and bolts of getting started. Altars, offerings, reaching out to deity, stuff like that. In part 3, we're going to be talking about really building that relationship, really learning to hear messages from them. We're going to talk about tarot and journeying, stuff like that. If you have questions at all about deity work, please put them in the comments below so that I can answer them either in the upcoming content, or I'm always happy to add like Q&A sections to the next two videos as well, so that we can answer any questions that you do have on deity work. And if you're interested, remember that my masterclass on January 28th, Shadow Work with Deity, is going to be 3 hours. We're going to be doing in-depth shadow work. We're going to journey with deity. If you don't know who you want to work with, we will find out. If you do have a face of deity in mind, we will introduce you to them. And if you have a face of deity that you are working with and you just want to deepen that connection and see how shadow work can go, then this is also a great masterclass for you. So throw your questions below and I will see you in the next video. Bye.